Yoshi and the Mysterious Book has finally arrived, and that means new game credits. These credits are, I think, particularly interesting for a few revelations. In this video, we're going to be looking at what's happening over at Goodfeel, the longtime developers of Yoshi, as well as the developers of some other recent Nintendo games, who appears to be the surprising choice of successor to Takashi Tezuka as the producer of the Yoshi series, and what this could all mean for the long-term organization of Nintendo's core EPD development teams. First up then, let's talk about Goodfeel. Now, this team has been working with Nintendo for pretty much 2 decades now. They worked on the Wario Land Shake It game, and then on Kirby's Epic Yarn, various Yoshis ever since Crafted World, and of course in 2024, they released Princess Peach Showtime. They have Osaka and Kyoto teams, and it seems like they do have a second branch office somewhere in Osaka, but the website is pretty clear that there's 2 main groups, with the Osaka office set up in 2020 in order to create their original project Bakaru, which released in 2024. Now, Princess Peach Showtime came out of presumably the Tokyo team in 2024 as well, but it seems that the Tokyo group is capable of having multiple concurrent development teams. You see, the entire top team from Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, it would appear, skipped Princess Peach Showtime entirely. Director Masahiro Yamamoto, as well as the art director, the game design manager, the programming manager, and the art manager were all no-shows for Princess Peach, and it seems likely that during this time they were working on developing Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. In fact, Showtime was directed as well as produced by the company founder Etsunobu Obisu, but the assistant directors were the number 2 on Crafted World, as well as the UI designer, and those people do not seem to have senior credits on this game. This might explain a little more about what happened to Goodfeel between Yoshi's Crafted Worlds release in 2019 and Princess Peach Showtime pretty much 5 years later. It seems that not only did they set up a satellite studio to work on Bakaru, but also their Nintendo-facing team subdivided. I guess this makes sense as a belt and braces in case Bakaru failed, and of course it's a good financial option to be able to expand in this way. They now have 2 well-remunerated but relatively safe bet Nintendo projects in quick succession alongside their riskier original ventures. But this does mean that Goodfeel potentially could be releasing games at a much faster rate than we've seen so far. There is a group that we haven't seen a game from in 2 years now, led by Kirby's Epic Yarn director Kentaro Sei. Now, this doesn't mean that something is going to be out tomorrow. A lot of the Princess Peach Showtime team are actually still credited on Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, albeit as artists and other general roles rather than as leaders. It may also be that the decision to take on 2 titles was simply a response to their wish to boot up Bakaru and not something they want to commit to for the long term. Perhaps next time they will all gather together on one single game rather than split their attention between 2 as they did with Showtime and Mysterious Book. Still, this does look a lot like the way Nintendo manage their dual-team internal studios, with 2 core concept groups operating pretty much independently within a larger body of developers, particularly art staff and others, who will bounce from one game to the other. And it does open the prospect, I feel, of the Goodfeel team that were working on Mysterious Book now pivoting to a project from Sei, which could release in the next couple of years if it's already pretty much been prototyped and is ready to go. This could be another Princess Peach, but maybe something new and ambitious. The field is very open. I also wonder, and this is probably something for another video, whether we might expect to see the same kind of subdivision elsewhere. Echoes of Wisdom took 5 years to come out, but we also know that the recent credits show on this team that it was largely the same group that worked on the port of Miitopia. Now, Grezzo has a long history with ports, but it does seem surprising that this key Zelda group was working on a secondary game like Miitopia, as opposed to it being one of their other porting teams. I'd thought that this might be the skeleton of a Mii-focused team that could work on Tomodachi Life, but Nintendo opted to build their own internal grouping for that game instead, and maintain the division between Tomodachi and Miitopia. Nevertheless, it feels quite plausible to me that a second-string Grezzo team could be ready to release a game very soon, and again, the idea here might be that they have 2 core development teams working on prototyping, but their art and other programming groups work to support whoever is ready with their game at that particular moment. Therefore, if there was another group that was ready to go with a core concept of a game in 2024 as Echoes of Wisdom finished, it might be that that game is finishing up maybe around 2026, 2027. Now, while Nintendo did not exactly invent this way of working, it is striking that these regular satellite studios are operating in a similar way, and it does seem to suggest the influence of Nintendo. HAL Laboratory, from what I can see, appear to all muck in together on each game, which is a little bit different, and I'm sure other studios approach these kinds of issues in their own ways. At any rate, the other major issues that we need to talk about are the changes at Nintendo. We know that Takashi Tezuka, the very long-standing member of the Mario team, the assistant director on the original Super Mario Bros., the director of The Legend of Zelda, well, he announced his retirement as an executive in the recent financial statement. Now, he is 65, but he's only been an executive since 2018, and this does leave open the possibility that he might remain as a producer at the company, but we have to face facts. The likeliest option is that he has simply retired from the company altogether, albeit many of the Nintendo senior people do seem to kibitz back after a period of time, and he may well do the same. For a long time, though, Tezuka has been shepherding EPD Group 10. Now, primarily, this is an internal team responsible for Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Maker, and Pikmin, but they also contract out on occasion, notably to Eighting on Pikmin 3 Deluxe and to Goodfeel on Yoshi. The team also inherited Koichi Hayashida from EPT8, the director of Super Mario Galaxy 2, among other great titles, and someone who brought a huge wealth of experience, particularly to Super Mario Bros. Wonder. My hunch for a long time has been that Takashi's successor would be Hayashida, an existing producer with deep experience of the Mario property. However, while this credits list does show another producer, it's not Hayashida. In fact, it's someone not usually associated with Mario at all, specifically the Splatoon creator Hisashi Nogami. Nogami is not a complete stranger to Yoshi, of course. He supervised Yoshi's Island DS and worked on Super Mario Advance 3 and Yoshi's Story, but most significantly, he was a character designer on the original Yoshi's Island, all the way back in the 90s, designing the Goonies. Still, with decades since his last Yoshi, it is pretty surprising to see him back on the property. Evidently, he has the experience to take on a producing role, but in previous years he has been focused pretty much exclusively on Splatoon and Animal Crossing, although in 2025 he was credited on Drag and Drive as a producer, and it seems like he has had a few other experimental titles over the years, such as working on the Wii series and on the Wario Plaza game, but it seems like a striking departure now to take on Yoshi, and I wonder if this could be signs of a new trajectory in terms of the way the groups are being organized. Now, there are a couple of different possibilities here. Evidently, Tezuka has been at the company for a long time, and so his experience will be sorely missed. So having someone from the original Yoshi's Island team does make sense as a successor, but more than that, Nogami is somebody who clearly has a great future at Nintendo. We know that there will be some significant changes that are likely to come down the track in the next few years. Shinya Takahashi, who is the executive director of the EPD development team, is likely to hit 65. Well, he will hit 65, but he's likely to possibly retire at that time, which is going to be only a couple of years away. Now, his number two, although the actual general manager of EPD, Yoshiaki Koizumi, is already in a position where he might step up as a producer, but he's not drastically younger himself. It might make more sense for the person who gave the narrative to Majora's Mask and Super Mario Galaxy to inhabit the global troubleshooter film buff role that Miyamoto is currently adopting, rather than necessarily step up purely as an executive for the EPD group. That would leave a vacancy not just for a general manager for EPD, but potentially in the medium to long term for an executive shepherding EPD itself. And while there are multiple candidates, and I've mentioned this on occasion with names like Koichi Kawamoto, who does seem to be, in many respects, Koizumi's number two, coming to mind, another candidate would be Hisashi Nogami, and that person would presumably need more than just experience of a couple of, albeit very major properties, like Animal Crossing and Splatoon, and so working with other groups might be quite useful here. So does this mean that Nogami is simply taking on Yoshi as a regular producer, or was this just a one-time deal to help them over a hump? Well, Another possibility, of course, is that this reflects a broader change to the structure of the Splatoon team. We know that Splatoon and Animal Crossing have for a long time been sharing a group team, and they have been sharing out staff in much the same manner that we talked about with Goodfeel. However, if Splatoon were reaching the point where it had broadly its own studio, Nintendo might also feel that they could append another group onto it. So perhaps the Yoshi team coming over to be under the umbrella of the Splatoon team might make some sense, and this would also justify why Kenta Usui, who has been a long-time fixture of EPD10, would end up on Splatoon 3 of all games when his previous titles were games like Hey Pikmin, Super Mario Maker, and of course, very many Yoshi titles. He's obviously a great talent to the Yoshi team, but bringing him over to the Splatoon group might be also a way to give some diversity to that team and make it not so reliant on Hisashi Nogami. Now, I should be clear that Nogami, although he has a great history with Group 5, is not a producer linked directly to it. People like Eiji Aonuma, while they often work with one specific group, are general producers of the company, and in theory, there's no particular reason why they can't gather groups from across the company to develop games. It's not like they have to work with the group that they have historically been connected to, but it does seem like these groups continue to exist in a broad sense. And so I do wonder, and it might be something that is clarified in an Ask the Developer interview over the next couple of days, whether or not there is a greater mixing of the EPD5 group that has been associated with Splatoon and potentially the EPD10 group, which until now has handled 2D Mario, Pikmin, and Yoshi. There are a few other people that are worth mentioning on these credits, such as the associate producer, Nobuo Matsumiya, who is somebody who project managed Tennis Fever and was also responsible for Princess Peach Showtime. Now, he's previously been with EPD10 and is generally someone who seems to be more associated with the general production roles, having supported on a quite large number of games over the years, but it is possible that if they do want somebody who has a more direct experience of Mario, as well as having experience working with the satellite studios like Grezzo and Goodfeel, that he might be due for more of a promotion in the years to come. And of course, Princess Peach Showtime was his first game as a fully fledged producer and not just as a supervisor or associate. Perhaps that was because this was a relatively new group and, of course, particularly a relatively new property for Nintendo, given that they only had one prior Peach game. But either way, it does suggest that he might have a slightly greater future at the company, and him being an associate producer on this game, while not hugely significant, he held the same role in Yoshi's Crafted World after all, does suggest that he will continue to be a significant figure in the development of the Yoshi games. Apart from that, there are other producers such as Toyokazu Nonaka and Shinya Saito, but both of these seem to be people who are regular staff producers managing outside contract games quite often. They don't seem to be people who have a particular history of roles as creative leads with specific properties in the same way that, let's say, Nagami, Kyogoku, or Anuma are producers associated specifically with Splatoon, Animal Crossing, and Zelda, respectively, although, of course, all that could change. And we have seen people like Risa Tabata, who sometimes works with the general producer crew, but also has her own properties that she is shepherding, at the very least Paper Mario, but also very likely Metroid Prime, as she is the number 2, it would seem, to the now retiring Kensuke Tanabe. At any rate, I think these were pretty interesting credits. I hope everyone who's playing the game really enjoys it, and I just say thank you so much for watching, and I will look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.